thank you to the organisers for the invitation to speak. And it seems like Judith and I should have synchronised slides before I spoke. I do lay claim to having developed the photos. I think I'm on the clock a bit here. So I work for some organisations. That should be obvious. I won't dwell on that. And I'm going to do this talk a little bit in reverse by giving the results first and then talking about how. Now, whenever you make a list of people to thank, you inevitably leave someone out. And I was sitting down the back thinking it would have been really great to have put my CEO on this list of people to thank. So, Michelle, wherever you are, I hope it's not a career-limiting move. Don't come Monday. But we certainly have done this together, and I think that's really important to acknowledge both. And we make changes, and we're not really sure how those changes are going to affect our patients and the people that we work with. I'm hoping that I can get on to the next slide. So we get data in blocks from our research unit, pre-crew, and we get that data at the start of each month, and this is sort of the number that we get. Steve Ball, I'm sure Steve's in the room, gets emailed 2 and 15 January, February, March, and so on. And in 2015, we finished in Western Australia with 128 survivors, and clearly, I thought that it was okay. Very clearly, the 2015 result was legacy of my predecessors' efforts, Prof Jacobs. In 2016, we got to 114. In 2017, 113. And when you're the medical director of an organisation focused on cardiac arrest, it feels a bit like going out and getting golden ducks in both innings in a test match when you're sitting on falling numbers. So we sort of, a few things happened that I'll talk about later on, but what I want you to note there is that most of the numbers are in single digits, and there's no more than 2 consecutive months in double figures. Does that make sense? So that's our history. So then 2018 starts, and we get 8, 12 and 13, and we think, it's okay, it's a pretty good start. And then the April result comes out, and we get 20. Right, highest number ever. And we think, hello. May comes out, we get another 20. So having never had more than 2 consecutive months, we then lay out 4. I'm telling Judith, things have changed. She's saying, settle down. It's obviously just a statistical error, bit of sampling. We do a 14, and then the rest of the year happens like that. 14, 12, 14, 12, 13 and 20. So 3 of our best months ever all occurred last year, and we end up at 172. So that's a 50% increase in year-on-year survivors. So this talk is the story of how. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Just throw this year's results in. They've continued. We've still got some patients to follow up. So we were really disappointed in this single figure in January, which broke our run of double figures cases. But essentially since February in 2018, we've had 16 out of 17 months in double figures. So something's really changed in cardiac arrest survival in Western Australia. That's the data presented graphically in a different way from way back in 1996 to the end of 2018. And how did we get there? Well, like many people in the room, we've been to Seattle and we've been repeatedly. So I think we've been 4 different times, and there's 4 or 5 of us who've attended Seattle. We went to CPR University in Phoenix, and we found the situation in Arizona to be very comparable with what happens in Western Australia, flat desert state with big distances beyond there. And I'm sitting in Seattle at the Resuscitation Academy thinking, we can absolutely do this. We can change. But maybe we've just been paying lip service to the ARC guidelines. Maybe we haven't fully committed. And I had a feeling that our paramedics were turning up to cardiac arrests and maybe to a degree just going through the motions. And I want to give them the tools to turn up to a cardiac arrest and say, where's the party? Like, we're going to save this person's life. And I think part of what we've managed to sell is hope. Another thing I certainly found out from the team in Seattle was that doing well is no accident, and the locations that do well pay great attention to every phase of care. And just finally, in this introductory session, I think we've got a problem with the language of how we talk about unexpected death. If you happen to survive cardiac arrest, the headlines scream miracle and fluke and chance. And I want to live in a world where surviving cardiac arrest is perhaps more expected. Think of the outrage that we all have when a child dies in a backyard swimming pool. We've instituted very effective public health measures to sort that out. And maybe we should be doing the same for cardiac arrest. So what have we done? We've decided to look at the whole system and not just focus on what ambulance services can do. This is the world's loneliest AED that we've installed in the car park at Nature's Window in Kalbarri, if anyone's familiar with that location. Like many jurisdictions, we have an app that's capable of alerting nearby first responders to someone in distress. And this is Donnybrook, which is a small town in the southwest that have tried to train their entire community in chest compressions. We've paid via pre-crew and Marine Review a lot of attention to what happens in the SOC, what happens in the operations centre, the language of cardiac arrest calls, what does that look like? And we've come across some really stunning insights, like the difference between tell me what happened and tell me what's happened. The difference if we talk to a caller about CPR in terms of do you want to or now we are going to. We've realised that the language we use plays a big role in patient outcome. And of course we're fully committed to bystander CPR, and perhaps committed in a way that some organisations aren't by doing first aid training. So we trained over 400,000 people last year in how to perform chest compressions, amongst other things. Steve, this is one for you. Albany's a little town. Perth's sort of up top left of the screen. Albany's a small town on the southern coast of Western Australia. One of the things we've come to realise is that it's all very well to have AEDs out there, but we've actually got them in the wrong place. Many of them are right next to each other on the main streets of our towns, and then we've got big swathes of locations where there's no AEDs. So having a cardiac arrest registry that dates back a long time, we know where cardiac arrests occur, and via our app we know where AEDs are, and they're actually not matched. So we've got a project going on in Albany trying to match where the cardiac arrests happen with where the AEDs actually are, and the AEDs are sort of clustered down the main street of Albany, effectively, and there are relatively fewer in the denser population areas of that town. Why did we choose Albany? No particular reason, just a convenient place to choose, and we had local buy-in, because the Mayor of Albany is a cardiac arrest survivor, amongst other things. A good place to work with. And we implemented a high-performance CPR model, which we thought about in great detail. This is Dan Rose's work, along with our college trainers. We've put all of our paramedics through a high-performance CPR training session, and I think we're close to having put all of our volunteers through high-performance CPR training. And I won't sort of bore you with watching all 10 minutes of this, but we really know what our gold standard model looks like, and we train to that. Yeah. And I think in the past we had high variation around that. I'll just hopefully be able to roll past that. So Dan Rose and I have done some things that make us look like sick freaks as well. We have gone and watched cardiac arrest vision in some really interesting places. So you hear of a cardiac arrest in a supermarket, and you ring the supermarket owner up and you say, hey, you had a cardiac arrest in your location yesterday. Would you be able to share the vision? And you'd be surprised at what people are willing to show you. I can confirm that Crown Casino is a cracking place to have a cardiac arrest. So Dan and I walked in, and Dan does all the legwork on these and I just take the glory, but Dan and I walked in and we met this immaculately turned out head of security, and of course a casino can focus in on the dirt under your little fingernail. Like, they got cameras everywhere. We said, we want to look at this cardiac arrest, and you sort of get patted down and go through a metal detector and sign your life away. Anyway, we watched it, and as we're watching it, we said to this guy, have you had anyone do this before? He said, no, and I'm a little nervous. What the hell are you doing here? I said, well, we're into cardiac arrest, and there'd be no one else in this state who would actually come and ask for this. And at the end of it, he said, I've learned a lot. Can't wait for the next one. And I said, well, don't sort of jinx yourself. But the stadium, which is right next door, have multiple cardiac arrests as well, and that's essentially population density, and it's the crowd that tend to watch AFL games. So it's an adrenergic-inducing environment, and the crowds at Eagles and Dockers games tend to be old. Yeah, so I'm like the kid brother in my section of the crowd, and I'm not young. So it's a great place to have a cardiac arrest, as are most sporting grounds. And if you're really interested in seeing what your team do, I really recommend going and having a look at the vision. And you get sort of some odd looks, but once you've done it a few times, it's okay. So one of the things we've asked ourselves is this change in cardiac arrest survivorship real? Okay. Why is it? And I can chop this up in a number of ways, but this is looking at population versus number of survivors since the year 2001, and this is just Perth Metro, where we've got better population data than we do in rural and regional Western Australia. I can chop that up by number of arrests, number of worked arrests, and I can tell you that it's real. You might then ask why. So this is raw data out of the cardiac arrest registry that Judith and Steve and their teams run, and I'd just like you to look at bystander CPR rates, which are now almost at 80%, having been in the low 60s just 4 years ago. So we've had a dramatic increase in bystander CPR, and that's again a factor of what happens in our operations centre and the training of our community. We're a very well trained community as far as cardiac arrests go. We've also had a really big increase in the deployment of community-based defibrillators to patients in cardiac arrest. So 27 in 2015, 111 defibrillators were placed on patients in cardiac arrest last year. Shocked 60 people, so not everyone's in VFib, and of the 60 people that were shocked, 40 survivors. So I think that's really important lesson. If you get shocked by a community-based defibrillator, you are in a survivors cohort, right? And everyone else needs to be on their game to get you what you need to do. So 2/3 of people in our database who got shocked last year walked out of hospital alive, and of course we know the survivors do really well. And there's been relatively no change in our response times. I didn't think that worth displaying a kind of a no change. It's been a mild improvement, but our response times haven't changed much. But we saw a lot more VFib last year, and I think we saw a lot more VFib because we're number one, getting defibrillators on people earlier, and I think our high performance CPR model is improving the length of time with which patients have got viable hearts. And I'll just share a little story from Dan Rose. So Dan goes and follows up some of our, we've got a bit of a bromance going on, Dan and I, maybe it sounds like that, but Dan goes and follows up some cardiac arrest cases, and he went into Royal Perth CCU a couple of months ago to follow up 2 cases, both of whom had gone home. And in that coronary care, we had 4 cardiac arrest survivors in coronary care, not ventilated, on their way out. And the question that was posed is, what the hell are you guys doing out there? Because we're seeing survivors like we've never seen them before. Interesting insight. Our ED colleagues are feeding back to us that patients are arriving into their ED in better shape than they used to. I've got no evidence to support that. That's just people ringing up and saying, hey, what's going on? Our OHCA survival last year, 37.9, which is really, really pleasing, and I guess puts us from a place of average performance by this criteria towards the top of the tree, at least in our area. And of course, the King County team remain the team to shoot for. I will just share a minor story. When we started this project in 2016, having had 114 survivors, we were aiming for 5 additional survivors a year. That's what we thought would be a really big tick. We had no expectation that we'd add 50 on in 1 year. So we stand up here kind of surprised and relatively satisfied. And of course, our challenge is to maintain and take that further. And I think it's always good to finish off with a laugh. So when you talk cardiac arrest all the time, when you listen to a lot of cardiac arrest calls, when you go around watching cardiac arrest videos, life can get a bit morose. So we actually have a lot of laughs in our team, a lot of fun. It's not all grim. And when you go to a party at night with your non-medical friends, what did you do today? Oh, I went to the stadium and watched a cardiac arrest video. It's kind of hard to explain the obsession, but I think we've all got it in Western Australia, and it's a pleasure to present our results. So thank you very much.